Hi, friends. Welcome to Miss Colleen's classroom. Today we will be exploring outer space. What do you already know about outer space? You might know that there are planets, that astronauts are people who go to explore space. You can see stars from Earth as well as the sun and the moon. And you might have even heard about a rocket launch. Let's see what else there is to learn about outer space. First, we'll read The Astronaut-Yettes. This is a book that was developed by NASA just for students to learn about sound and see how a class watches a rocket take off from their classroom. Next, we'll watch a short video about the history of exploring space. Third, we'll learn with SciShow Kids. Then, we'll actually get to decorate our very own rocket. And last, we'll watch some live rocket launches. Let's get started. The Astronaut-Yettes explore sound. The author is Jessica Sain, co-author Rachel Power, and illustrator Cindy Bush. On a Friday morning in Cocoa Beach, Florida, Mr. Armstrong's classroom was getting ready for their daily story time. They sat on the carpet, waiting to hear more about the thrilling new book their classmate brought to share. As Mr. Armstrong began introducing the exciting book, a rumbling and roaring noise grew louder and louder outside. It felt like the whole classroom was shaking. Orion pointed to the window and said, "Look, Mr. Armstrong, the window is rattling. What's going on?" What do you think that noise could be? Let's look out the window. What do you see? Mr. Armstrong smiled and quickly gathered his students around the window, where he pointed to an object near the clouds. The object had left a trail of fire and smoke as it raced toward the sky. Mr. Armstrong explained, "That noise is coming from NASA's Commercial Crew rocket program launch. The astronauts are headed to do very important science experiments on the International Space Station. Our windows are rattling or vibrating because the sound from the rocket is so loud. It's reaching as far as our classroom. The vibrations are caused by the sound moving through the floor, walls, and windows." Wow, I didn't know that sound could move through floors, walls, and windows. Did you? As the students watched in amazement at the rocket taking NASA astronauts to the space station, Stella looked at Mr. Armstrong and exclaimed, "This is the coolest thing I have ever seen. Can we sit here and watch the next one?" Mr. Armstrong responded, "Commercial Crew will not launch another rocket again until next month. Even though we can't see another launch today, I think this would be a great time to learn about sound vibrations so that we are ready for the next one." The students returned to their seats and listened to Mr. Armstrong explain their new design challenge. They love new challenges because they get to work together to solve a problem. Mr. Armstrong asked, "Does anyone remember what caused the windows to vibrate?" Do you remember? What caused the windows to vibrate?" Aurora raised her hand and correctly answered that sound made those vibrations. Oh, that's right, it was the sound moving through the floors and walls. When Mr. Armstrong asked if anything else makes sound, Stella paused from drumming on her desk. She added, "Musical instruments do." Mr. Armstrong smiled. "Exactly. Today, you will work in groups to design an instrument that shows sound moving with vibrations." The classroom hummed with ideas. Each group brainstormed designs for their instrument and predicted how they might sound. Mr. Armstrong reminded the students they could use any of the items in the classroom makerspace, a place where the students collected old items that could be reused to make something new. The students worked together in harmony to plan, build, and test their instrument ideas. Some of the designs didn't work at first, but the students didn't give up. Soon, each group was ready to present an idea to the classroom, and they were all excited to find out what the others had done. Aurora quickly volunteered her group as the first to show their class the new kazoos, which were each made with a toilet paper roll that had a piece of wax paper rubber banded to the end. When they blew air into the rolls, the wax paper buzzed and vibrated. Orion's table shared their new guitar that they made out of an old tissue paper box with rubber bands wrapped around the sides. When one of the students plucked the rubber band, it made a thumping noise and also vibrated. Leo and Stella were in the last group to share, but when they all stood, they were empty-handed. The other students looked around, confused. Aurora asked, "Where's your instrument? Were you listening to Mr. Armstrong's directions? You have to have one." Leo gave a signal to his group. They all started humming and placed their hands over their own throats. Leo stopped to explain to Aurora that they do have an instrument, their voices. Mr. Armstrong smiled and said, "That's right, Leo. Our voices carry sound, and we can feel the vibration on our throat. Let's all try it." The whole classroom began to hum. After each group shared their instruments, Aurora raised her hand and asked Mr. Armstrong, "Which group designed the best instrument?" All of the group members looked at each other, then at Mr. Armstrong, hoping that he would choose their design. "What do you think? What was your favorite instrument that the class created?" Instead, Mr. Armstrong said, "That's the funny thing about design challenges. You all designed the best version of your idea. For these challenges, there isn't just one right answer. You can solve problems in many different ways and still reach a common goal." Orion spoke up. "I never thought of that, Mr. Armstrong, but you're right. We all found a different way to show sound through vibrations. That means we all solved the problem in our own way. I'd say that was a success." A month later, Mr. Armstrong's class anxiously awaited the next commercial crew spacecraft launch. Some students watched the countdown on the classroom TV, while others gathered at the window, waiting to see the rocket lift off in the distance. Aurora noticed some differences between the spacecraft on TV and the one from the last launch, and asked Mr. Armstrong, "Why does this rocket look different from the one we saw a month ago?" Mr. Armstrong explained, "NASA's Commercial Crew program works with two different companies, designing two different spacecraft to take astronauts safely to the space station. Just like the two companies working with NASA, you all designed different objects to do the same thing last month. Do you remember?" Leo spoke up, I do. We all designed instruments that showed sound through vibration, and even though our groups made different designs, we were all right." Orion looked out the window, then back to Mr. Armstrong and asked, Do you think we can be astronauts when we grow up? With a smile, Mr. Armstrong explained, NASA is working hard to make sure more students your age can grow up and become astronauts, engineers, and scientists. You have to remember to always try your best in school, and when you grow up, choose a job that you will love. With hard work, one day you may be on your way to the space station too. You are all the astronaut yets. Suddenly, the countdown began on the TV, but everyone looked out the window instead. The students counted along. Friends, why don't you count along with me? Let's count down from 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lift off! Seconds later, the rumbling noise made the windows vibrate once again as the Commercial Crew rocket raced toward the stars. You can explore more activities with sound and learn more about NASA's Commercial Crew program at www.nasa.gov/STEM/CCP, also in the link below.
The Space Age, written by Pam Holden. Red Rocket Readers. Space Dog. The space age started with the first satellite. It was only as big as a basketball, but the Sputnik satellite flew right around the Earth. The second satellite took a dog for a space ride. The first person to fly into space was an astronaut from Russia. He flew around the Earth once, which took 1.5 hours. Then he landed safely back on Earth. Yuri Gagarin, 1961. Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin. 3 United States astronauts were the first people to fly to the moon. They took 4 days to get there. 2 of the men landed on the moon and walked around. Apollo, 1969. They put up a flag and took some photographs. After 2.5 hours, they left the moon. They brought back some moon dust and rocks. There have been 5 more landings on the moon. A space shuttle is a spaceship that can fly into space more than once. It is sent into space by 2 big rockets. When it comes back, it lands like a plane. Space Shuttle Discovery. There is a huge telescope called Hubble flying around the Earth. It takes pictures of the stars and planets to send back. Hubble Space Telescope. There are many satellites flying around Earth. They send back photos and weather reports. Our television and telephone services use satellites every day. Robots are good for exploring space because they don't need to eat or sleep. They aren't frightened of danger, and they can stay in space for a long time. Mars Pathfinder, 1997. The first landing on a planet was a robot that was sent to Mars in a spacecraft. The robot was like a small car that drove around and took pictures of the planet. Now there is a space station so that astronauts can find out more about space. They need oxygen tanks to help them breathe. The astronauts float around because there is nothing to hold things down. Space Station. They wear special spacesuits when they walk outside the space station. There is not much noise in space. It can change from very cold to burning hot. Sometimes they live there for many months.
Squeaks and I love exploring. We go exploring in our neighborhood and we see what we can discover in nature around the fort. And sometimes we pretend we're exploring in outer space. Ooh, what's that, Squeaks? You think we should go to Mars? Okay, let's do that next. And maybe someday people will go to Mars in real life too. Since before you and I were born, people have loved to talk about rocketing into space and exploring Mars. There are 8 planets moving around the sun, including Earth. And Mars is our neighbor, the next planet after Earth in the solar system. And it's the friendliest neighbor we have. In many ways, Mars is actually a lot like Earth. The length of a day on Mars is just over 24 hours, very close to how long a day is on Earth. It also has seasons like Earth, which not all planets do. But Mars is also very different from Earth in some ways, which is why it would be so hard for people to visit. One big problem is that there isn't enough air on Mars to breathe without a spacesuit. Mars is also very cold and dry since it's much farther from the sun. It's so cold most of the time that its water is almost all frozen into ice, and it's buried beneath the surface of the planet. Another problem is that even though Mars is our neighbor, it's still a long way from Earth. Mars goes around the sun a little slower than Earth, which means the planets usually don't line up. Sometimes Earth can be on one side of the sun, while Mars is all the way on the opposite side. So if we wanted to take a trip to Mars, first, we'd have to wait until the planets got close together, and that only happens about once every 2 years. But even then, it would take 7 whole months to get there. That's a long time for astronauts to be traveling through space, and scientists are still figuring out how to keep them healthy while they're floating in space for so long. Once we got to Mars, we would need to eat and breathe, just like we do on Earth. But since we can't breathe the air, and there are no plants or animals to eat, we'd have to bring our own air and food, or figure out how to make them out of Mars soil and ice. Maybe we'd be better off not going to Mars and putting all that energy into making the Earth a better place to live. Or before we send human explorers over, we can keep learning about Mars and figure out whether it's possible to live there. We've been studying Mars for a long time, because even though humans haven't visited yet, we have sent machines to explore for us, starting more than 50 years ago. Spaceships without people on them have flown by the planet to study it, and special types of robots have even landed on it. No, not robot rats, Squeaks. They're a special kind of robot designed to land on Mars and explore it, called a rover. We've got 2 rovers still exploring Mars right now, named Opportunity and Curiosity. To explore Mars, the rovers use a special design called the Rocker Bogie System. Isn't that a great name? I know, Squeaks, I like saying it too. Rocker Bogie System. With this system, the Mars rovers have 6 wheels, and each wheel has its own motor powering it. That helps the rover climb over rocks and steep hills, and to keep its body level so it doesn't tip over or get damaged. This way, the rovers can keep exploring and keep sending information back to us on Earth. The next rover to Mars is set to leave Earth in 2020, just a couple of years from now. And in the meantime, we're planning to launch a lander this year. That's kind of like a rover, except it can't move around after it lands, so it studies the planet while staying put. Some scientists are also trying to send people to Mars eventually, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time before we're ready to do that. Probably more than 10 or even 20 years at the very least. It's much easier to send robots to Mars than it is to send humans, since robots don't have to breathe or eat. But robots work very slowly, and they can't do that many scientific tests by themselves. Even though it would be a lot of work, there's so much more that we could discover if we could send people to explore. And who knows, if the first astronauts to explore Mars take off in 20 years, maybe you'll be on that first flight. I guess it's going to be a while before we can explore Mars, Squeaks, but there's still so much more to explore right here on Earth. Do you think we should send people to Mars? Would you like to go there yourself? Ask a grown-up to help you. Leave a comment down below or send us an email to kids@scishow.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time here at the Fort.
Our friends at NASA have launched some pretty cool rockets. Let's watch how their newest project, the Space Launch System, with its Orion capsule, will fly and land back here on Earth. The eventual mission? Mars.